territory. The Russian Arctic 2007 expedition saw a submarine place a Russian flag on the seafloor at the North Pole, prompting other countries to react. The Russian Public Opinion Research Center asked citizens if they saw the Arctic as important for Russia. 70% said it is. 15% felt it was not. The survey also found that over half of Russians believe their country should pursue a firm course to secure influence in the Arctic. 18% said division of the Arctic was unnecessary and dividing the territory would undermine its status as an area of global environmental significance. Back to you, Peter.
Okay, Christoph, I'd like to go back to you. In researching this program, I came across a number of articles, maybe alarmist, but the militarization of the Arctic. There are some people that are worried about that because if there are no conventions on that specifically right now, everybody can do whatever they want to do. Is that a concern? Is that a legitimate concern?
The point is, we must not forget the Arctic has been an area of interest for the military. During the Cold War, the Arctic Ocean was where the Russian and the US submarines were hunting each other. So the military is very well familiar with the Arctic. We still do have nuclear weapons in the Arctic, and at the same time we do have disputed areas in the Arctic with the gray zone that lies between Norway and Russia, with seemingly minor spots like the famous Hans Island that's disputed between Canada and Greenland/Denmark. So we do have military in the Arctic. We do have the long discussion about the Russian fighter jets just flying past just outside NATO borders, and the feeling of uneasiness that you have, for example, in Norway, even though Norwegian militaries...
Christoph, just as a point of order, this is the point of order. Every time that happens, the Russians tell their neighbors that they're flying exercises, so it shouldn't be that big of a surprise. Media overblows that sometimes. If I can go to Patrick, I mean, also China says it's interested in the Arctic. It doesn't have any real major claim there, but it's certainly it said it's going to send up ships for research reasons, presumably, but it's still eyeing it. Where there's oil in the world, the Chinese want to show up. I mean, again, I'm not saying to overdo militarization, but everybody is going to want a piece of the pie, and the Chinese have a very huge appetite, don't they?
There's no doubt about this, that the Chinese are a very, very mercantilist nation right now, and yes, they're going to want to have a role there. What concerns me more about this than anything is the increasing militarization of this area in terms of defense planning in the United States, where over at the Pentagon, they already consider the Arctic to be a strategic problem related to climate change. Once the military gets into the climate change business, I can guarantee you that, one, the issue is going to be perpetuated, and two, it's going to become very contentious.
Okay, Lisa, I'd like you to jump on that. I mean, the military and climate change, I mean, environmental change, I mean, is that a good mix? Should we be happy about that, or should we be concerned?
Well, I think it's important. The military has obvious interests in climate change and how it will affect the strategic interests of the United States. And I actually don't think it's that helpful to have a lot of discussion about, crisis and military conflict in the Arctic, because, in fact, there is a very extensive web of treaties, agreements, codes of conduct, and a variety of other instruments that do regulate human activity in the Arctic. And it is, things are being conducted up there in a very, in accordance with the rule of law, which is critically important. But having said that, there are important gaps in that. For example, there is no mechanism right now to manage fishing in the Arctic. And China, as you mentioned, along with Korea, Japan, Taiwan, a whole range of other countries are going to be interested in fishing in the Arctic once the fish move up there. But right now, we have no way of managing that fishing activity. Similarly, with oil and gas development, we have no internationally agreed standards that would govern oil and gas in a way that makes sure that the oil and gas development that does take place is done in a coordinated, environmentally sensitive fashion. Because what we don't want is major environmental disasters that could contribute to the tension in the region, which, although it is there, I think is manageable now. But I think it's very important for leaders in all of the Arctic countries to come together quickly to negotiate rules over how things are going to happen in the Arctic before you start seeing countries like China and others begin to move into the region.
Christoph in Berlin.
I'd like to ask
okay, go ahead. Okay, Patrick, go right ahead. Go ahead.
I'd like to ask a question to the group, because I think it gets to the issue. Let's just say that there happens to be a very large deposit of oil right underneath the North Pole. Who gets it?
Okay, you preempted me. That's exactly what I was going to ask. Go ahead, Christoph, first in Berlin.
From what I understand, talking to geologists, that's a rather hypothetical question. But I mean, that addresses one point that we need to be aware of. When Lisa spoke about gaps that we do have, we also have the gap that there is no dispute settlement system for overlapping territorial claims on the basis of the UN Convention. And we would have exactly that situation for the North Pole, where Russia has already prepared a claim, where most probably Denmark and Greenland will be preparing one, where Canada will be preparing one, and all these claims would overlap at the pole, and we don't have a dispute settlement system there. So there we are.
Patrick, do you want to answer your own question? Do you have an answer to that?
It's not a pretty picture. That's the reason I asked the question, was to demonstrate that.
Okay, Lisa, you talked about all of these conventions before, and you're right. I mean, there's a lot of detail there. But as the ice melts, I mean, are people going to start staring at each other to see who blinks first? Because there's a lot more you can get out of the Arctic now than before. Shipping, fishing, natural gas, oil. I mean, what I'm getting at is, will be all bets off, or we want to renegotiate? The Americans may want to go their own way, like they have for the most part in the Arctic. I mean, it's getting messy. It's getting very messy as the polar cap melts.
There's no doubt about that. It is getting messy, but I do think that there is an opportunity. But again, we have to move quickly. The interest in the Arctic is growing every day. There are, China, the European Union, you have interest being expressed in Arctic resources around the world. The Arctic countries really have to get their act together, come together, agree on how these resources will be developed in a way that protects all of their interests. And I think those opportunities are few and far between, but they're coming up quickly. There's a meeting that the Arctic 5 coastal foreign ministers will have later this month in Ottawa that provides an opportunity for them to begin to talk about this issue. But it has to be elevated on the stage, on the priority list of the foreign ministers and heads of state throughout the Arctic, if that's going to happen in a timely fashion. We don't have a lot of time. The Arctic ice is retreating very rapidly.
I mean, one of the things I find interesting is that we don't even have a complete agreement among all of these countries about where their sovereignty begins and ends. I mean, how can we talk about the future of the Arctic if we can't figure out what today is now? Patrick, do you want to say something there?
Yeah, that is the problem. In Nunavut, which is the Canadian side of the Arctic, there's a tremendously large archipelago of islands. Do those all belong to Nunavut, and does that give that nation a right to extend very, very far out into the ocean? These things have to be worked out.
Okay, Christoph, how about you? I mean,
we do have another point.
Okay, go right ahead.
Have another point that we need to discuss, because the question is who's actually sitting at the table. So is it just the 5 Arctic states, or is it stakeholders like China, like the EU, who also feel that they should need to have a say there? I mean, we do have the Arctic Council, but in terms of politics, it's a really weak institution, and we do have on one hand the demand of stakeholders like the EU, like China, to participate in policy discussions, which they could do in the Arctic Council. But on the other hand, we have the polar states who say, well, we have a tendency to sort that out among the 5 of us.